okay, this feels different now. And in a better way, it feels lighter. It feels there's more of a clarity that I'm feeling within myself. And then you kind of, it's almost like sometimes I don't think we notice in the moment that we're healing. And we notice more as like we look back, even if it's just like, a minute or two, but just that looking back, like, wow, I handled that differently, or I didn't feel as triggered in that. It's like, wow, I'm healing. I feel that.
Welcome to the Medical Trauma Support Podcast, the show where we shine a light on the hidden impacts of medical trauma, explore tools for healing, and empower you to take control of your health journey. I'm Sarah, your host, a passionate advocate for trauma-informed care, somatic healing, and compassionate conversations. I'll bring you expert insights, healing strategies, and personal stories of resilience to help you feel seen, heard, and supported on your path to recovery. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Medical Trauma Support Podcast. This is our third episode in our birth trauma series, our third and final. And Shelley Freeman is back, so we can continue this discussion. And, in our first episode, we talked about what birth trauma is. In our second, we went into how birth trauma can impact us in the postpartum period. And then today, we're going to talk about how to heal. Like, what are the components that we really need to heal? So, Shelley, welcome back. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Gosh, the first thing I can't help but think is that, it is challenging to heal.
Mm-hmm.
It's challenging, and we want to validate that, first of all, especially challenging to heal in the system that we have.
Mm-hmm.
There's not easy access to certain things, especially if you don't have wealth.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're in a place where, poverty is an issue, easy access to like lactation support, doulas, even just in the postpartum period, like getting back to work. If you or your partner, pretty much it's like, well, we have to go back to work, or like we don't have money, we have to. We don't get, these weeks or months. So I think it's hard. It's hard to heal within the system that we have. And I don't want to minimize that, because I think sometimes people can feel like something must be wrong with me, or I'm doing it wrong.
Right.
Because this isn't, I should be able to do all of these things.
Right.
But
yeah. And I think too, I think that is such a good point, that it is a privilege to be able to heal. Many people don't have, like you said, the financial resources. For some people, it's just also really inaccessible because maybe they're living in a place where there aren't a lot of resources available to them. And then I also just think about what it takes to step into healing. It's a little bit scary. So there are so many things that can make it really challenging. But also, once you do step in and you find the way for you, right? It's a unique journey. And so for some people, they may have tried one thing, or they may have been with one therapist who wasn't a fit, and they're like, it's not going to work for me.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, you just haven't found the right fit. So, and that's a little bit of what we're going to talk about today, or what some of the factors, some of the ideas, different ways that people listening can step into healing.
Absolutely. Healing, I don't think, for a lot of people, it's not usually this one aha moment, or where the light bulb goes off. It's usually a period of intentional, slow, calculated steps on your own, working with a therapist and community, where over time you kind of glance back and you're like, okay, this feels different now. And in a better way, it feels lighter. It feels there's more of a clarity that I'm feeling within myself. And then you kind of it's almost like sometimes I don't think we notice in the moment that we're healing, and
Hmm.
we notice more as like we look back, even if it's just like, a minute or two, but just that looking back, like, wow, I handled that differently, or I didn't feel as triggered in that. It's
Hmm.
like, wow, I'm healing. I feel that.
Hmm. And I think it's so important to do that. So for people listening who have noticed these changes and this work that they have done, they have made these changes happen.
Mm-hmm,
Sometimes we forget to take that minute or 30 seconds to be like, wow, things are different. And they're different because I did something, I
mm-hmm,
made a change.
mm-hmm.
And that's so powerful and very motivating to continue on the path.
Absolutely, absolutely. When you look back and you see it is happening. Gosh, I wish that we could do things though, like to make, paid family leave,
Right.
um, for moms, dads, partners, spouses,
Yeah.
more equal and more accessible.
Hmm.
It's very sad, when you think about a mom in poverty that has to get back to, say, her job at, working at the grocery store.
Right.
And it's like, okay, I can take 2 weeks off of work
Hmm.
before, things would get scary.
Right.
And then other people in places of power or that have a job that, is more lucrative, they can get like 6 months off.
Right. Right.
Um, and that needs to change.
Absolutely. Yeah, that does really need to change. That makes healing almost impossible.
Hmm.
And again, it goes
Hmm.
back to us talking about it as a
Hmm.
privilege that most people or many people don't have.
Absolutely.
And it leads me to think about one of the first kind of areas that we wanted to talk about today, which is community. And um,
Hmm.
even for people who aren't as privileged financially or with time,
Hmm.
finding a community is a way that could be maybe the best choice for somebody in that situation to start their healing. You know, there are, I mean, you know a lot about a lot of these because you work with so many moms, but some of the different online groups that
Yeah.
maybe they could attend when they have a minute.
Hmm. That piece, um, Postpartum Support International is a
Hmm.
great resource. They have online support groups that are free. Um, gosh, anything from, dealing with postpartum anxiety to, having the death of their baby,
Hmm.
or pregnancy loss.
Hmm.
Wonderful, wonderful resource there.
Hmm.
They also have a helpline, peer support mentor program, and then a Facebook community.
Hmm.
So I think reaching out even just to some of those free resources can
Hmm.
really create a good buffer. And there's certain other, I mean, there's a lot of support as far as social media when it comes to like different groups that you can do online.
Hmm.
If somebody dealt with like preeclampsia, HELP syndrome, eclampsia when they were pregnant, there's a wonderful evidence-based Facebook group there, um, that offers a lot of support, but also like education
Hmm.
without giving false narratives about maybe what caused that. Um,
Right, which is, a danger when you're online, but at the same time, having access to those groups, especially if you aren't able to attend a group online or in person, at least having that place to go and see that you're not alone. You're not the only one who's going through this, to feel as though you're a sense of, you have that sense of community.
Mhm,
And even outside of that, if it's possible, when you are a new mom and you see another new mom at the grocery store or walking their baby in the stroller, you know, creating your own community is
mhm.
so powerful and can be so healing to have that community of people who understand.
And it just occurred to me, and I don't know as much about this, but somebody had mentioned this to me recently, and you might know. It's called, there's an app and it's called Peanut, where you
Yes.
can essentially find friends that are close by to you that say you're going through a pregnancy, you want to find local friends that are pregnant or other moms. That would
Mm-hmm.
be, it's kind of, it sounds like, and I need to play on it, but it's like a dating app for friendship.
So I have heard of that. I haven't used it. I haven't really looked into it, but I will find the link and put it in the show notes for anyone listening
Okay.
who's interested in that. But I remember when I had my first baby almost 14 years ago, and my friends I had prior to becoming a mom didn't have kids. And so I was like, I need some mom friends. And so I literally, if I went to the grocery store, I would start chatting up another mom who was like wearing a baby or had a baby in a stroller, just like, oh,
Mhm.
hi. Oh, how old's your baby? Because I so desperately wanted that community of people who knew what it was like because I had no clue what it was really like to have an infant.
Yeah.
Yeah. So having a way to do that on an app and everyone else on the app is also looking for friends,
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
such a great idea.
Yeah. That was really, really a smart way to navigate that.
Mhm.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. We all need friends. I mean, like humans need friends. We need connection. We need community. It's just biologically a part of being
Mhm.
human. So
And
anyone listening,
especially, yeah, no, go ahead.
yeah, find those friends is what I'm saying, to people listening. Go find those friends, use the app if you need, work up the
Mhm.
courage to talk to somebody you see out pushing their baby.
Prioritizing that is huge. And I think especially once you become a mom,
Mhm.
because there is, I mean, even the Surgeon General had put out not too long
Mhm.
ago, just how motherhood is it's creating this um, environment of loneliness,
Mhm.
incredible deep loneliness. And I
Mhm.
think, if you just as a mom reflect on that in your own life,
Mhm.
think about the last time you got together with that friend for coffee. Think about the
Mhm.
last time that you actually had one-on-one time with a friend where you guys weren't like screaming out to your kids, in the background. Or even, gosh, a girls' trip, or
Mhm.
going to, get pedicures. Like, I mean, I know the joke, and I've seen it around, but it's applicable, I think, to moms. Is this idea of, okay, it's January and we need to see each other, and looking at your calendar and then being like, okay, what do you have available in March, April?
Yes.
'Cause it's like, and so
Yeah.
you have to be intentional about that, and you have to be intentional about accessing and connecting with the community.
Mhm. Yeah, making time for
Mhm.
that because it's so easy, I think, in this culture to get into the busy, busy, busy. But there is, like you said, the well, now the previous Surgeon General,
Mhm.
um, yes, it is an epidemic of loneliness.
Yeah.
And we have so much research now to back up the importance of social connection, how people live longer when they have strong social
Mhm.
connections.
Mhm.
Life is better when we have that social connection because we need it. We
Mhm.
biologically need that connection.
Yeah.
So I love what you said about making that a priority.
Mhm.
I know it's hard to say that when people are so busy, but you have to make the time. You have to take the step in that direction to change
And part
that
of
in your
that,
life.
absolutely. Part of that, I think also you have to be willing to be vulnerable,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you have a new baby. I mean, the thought of inviting anyone over or just saying, if somebody says, well, what do you need? Can I bring you anything? Yes, like food,
Mm-hmm.
coffee, all the things. And
Mm-hmm.
don't worry about your house being a mess. Don't
Exactly.
worry about clothes everywhere and, oh, the bathrooms are dirty. And this is real life. And this is real
Mm-hmm.
life, especially when you have kids and especially when you have a new baby. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
nothing is getting done. And so
Right.
being able to be a little vulnerable and say, okay, things don't have to look perfect when I reach out for that support and
Mhm.
that connection. Because I think a lot of times we'll say, I'll do that when. I'll do
Mhm.
that when I have time to clean the house. I'll do that when, you know, I slept well the night
Mhm.
before. And it's like that, if we wait till when, then we're losing that community right when we need
Mhm.
it.
Right when we really, really need it.
Hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. So we need to make space for it and figure out a way to work it into our lives. And
Hmm.
the thing is, everybody else is feeling that same way. So to
Hmm.
remember that when you actually call a friend, when you reach out to somebody, you're helping them. Because I think oftentimes we think we're like, oh, we're asking for this. Actually, you're giving because everybody needs social connection. So
Hmm.
think of it in the way that, like, I am reaching out to somebody today and I'm going to help them get some social connection.
Yes. Yeah.
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 We all need it because, I mean, it can so easily be, okay, you get together with a friend and then like a year passes and you're like,
Mm-hmm.
wow, we
Mm-hmm.
literally let a year go. So that
Yeah.
intentionality piece is really, really important.
Yeah. So that's really in what we're talking about today and healing from medical trauma. Like step one, community. Find your community, whether it's in person or if you're looking at the postpartum support international groups or you're going online and you're finding Facebook groups.
Hmm.
Find your community. That's really
Hmm.
step one in healing from birth trauma.
Absolutely.
And another area that we wanted to talk about today, another way to heal is through the body. You know, we talk about somatics, and that's really what that means. Is somatic work is tapping into your body, the wisdom of your body, your nervous system, and there are a lot of different ways to do that. You can do that with a therapist like Shelley. You can do it with a trauma informed yoga teacher. You can do it with a yoga therapist. There are a lot of different ways to access that somatic support and healing from a trauma. Um, and something you can even do on your own is understanding that when you have experienced a trauma, oftentimes your body needs to move to process it. So getting regular movement is very helpful. Um, but understanding that really our bodies have so much wisdom. And what often happens with trauma is that we turn away from the body because something happened there that was unsafe and overwhelming. And as we gently and slowly, this is a gentle and slow and loving process, but as we gently start to turn back to the body, we reestablish that relationship and we listen to the body and we start to befriend the body. So as I start to turn towards and listen, I may start to notice more when I'm hungry. And part of that befriending relationship is, oh, wow. I'm actually listening to my body and I'm hungry, so I'm going to go eat something. Or listening to your body and realizing, wow, I am really a lot more tired than I realized I was because I'm tapping into my body and listening. And so maybe you take a nap if you have that luxury, which many people don't, especially uh, early in the mothering process. Maybe you put on a yoga nidra, which you can find free yoga nidra 20-minute recordings. I actually, on this podcast, just spoke with Kim Humphrey of Vibrational Body. I know she has a free yoga nidra and she's amazing. So you can look her up. Kim Humphrey of Vibrational Body has a free yoga nidra. Jen Wooten of Via Somatic, I believe she has a free yoga nidra and some rest practices on her site. And so sometimes for new moms, that's one of the most beautiful ways to get rest when your body's telling you you really need to rest, is to just put on a yoga nidra. Maybe if your baby's hungry, you're nursing your baby or giving your baby a bottle while you sit on the couch or lay on the floor and listen to that yoga nidra. But the more that we listen to the body and then actually do what the body is asking for, we step into more and more of a friendly and loving relationship. And there is just so much wisdom held in the body as we are on this healing journey. And Shelley, I know from our conversations and from knowing you and how you work with moms that the somatic work is a piece of your work too. And so I didn't know if there was more that you wanted to add.
When I think about that, I mean, first I'm thinking about we want to validate and we want to get curious about and really understand why we might have experienced maybe that turning away from our body in moments of trauma. That is definitely a protective part of ourselves that is really trying to help us in that moment, because whatever we're
Yes.
experiencing in our body is overwhelming. It's dangerous, painful, all of those things. But being able to say, you know, offer one, just some validation that you did nothing wrong in that moment with feeling as though, or even turning away from your body and needing to disconnect from that experience. And then I think part of it is being able to give people this experience of you can step into your body and connect with it, and then you can step out. And then you can step in a little bit more, kind of like thinking about it as like a titration process. So when things are with EMDR therapy, when things are really intense and it's like, okay, I can't even look at my birth trauma.
Right.
I can't talk about it. I can't think about it. You want me to feel that in my body. I can't even go there. That there's things that we can do that can help you step in and then, okay, step a little bit out. And titrate that process so that it's less overwhelming.
Right.
And then also just helps to kind of reestablish this connection that I can be in my body and I can feel some safety. And I think that that's really important, because oftentimes birth trauma can create this relationship between you and your body that is very much, with tension and odds. And so being able to help in a somatic way to reestablish that relationship again, I think is a very, very good thing.
Yes, absolutely. And being able to, again, we both use these words, slowly and gently reestablish that. And then you start to feel the sense of safety in your body that you had either lost or maybe hadn't felt for many, many years. And there is just this stability of being able to find safety in your own body that changes life in a really amazing way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And oftentimes that's the thing that we need to work on first. And therapy is this sense of safety. Because if you think about it, kind of that's one of the lowest kind of needs that we have, which is we need to have a basic sense of safety in the moment in order to do some of the deeper work.
Yes.
Because if we don't feel safe, or even for some people that might just mean safe enough, then you really can't go deeper.
No, you can't. And I think oftentimes depending on the person, sometimes it takes a very long time to establish any even safe enough. And then other people, based on our experiences in life, are able to get to safety a little bit faster. So But that also leads me into, Shelley, our third point that we wanted to talk about today, and that is therapy and
Mhm,
finding a practitioner
mhm,
that you resonate with
mhm.
so that you can find a place where you feel safe enough to start to explore getting to safe enough.
Absolutely. And one of the first places that I think of, and this is where I did a lot of my EMDR training and continued training
Mm-hmm.
um, through the perinatal lens, and it's the Touchstone Institute. So if
Okay.
you look up the touchstoneinstitute.org,
Mm-hmm.
there is a directory of therapists, and I'm on there, who have been trained in EMDR or certified in EMDR through the perinatal lens.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a specialty, this is an expertise for them. And you
Mm-hmm.
can look, based on your state, where you're located. Um, and that's a really good resource to find someone.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a great idea.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Um,
and Shelley, I know in the previous ones you talked about the states that you work in. Can you
mhm.
tell us again which states you're working in for moms who are listening and are looking
Yes,
for therapeutic support?
yes, absolutely. So my whole practice right now is virtual,
Mm-hmm.
and I work North Carolina, Virginia, DC, South Carolina, and Florida
Mm-hmm.
virtually in all of
Mm-hmm.
those places. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think there has been a really big shift, especially since 2020, where a lot of people are choosing to have virtual therapy and have found it very
Mhm.
effective. And honestly, for especially for like new moms, maybe more accessible than getting your baby in the car and getting out and doing an in-person session, which are still wonderful, right? In-person sessions are also wonderful. And I think so much of it depends on the person
Mhm.
looking for the right therapy fit. Some people really want in person, some people only want virtual. So there are a lot of therapists that are making that shift to doing entirely virtual,
Mhm.
having entirely virtual practice, I think, because there is such a demand for it.
I think it's interesting. So all of my training in EMDR was over the pandemic, so it was all
Mm-hmm.
virtual.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember them saying that even before the pandemic happened, they had already done research out of Australia
Mm-hmm.
showing that EMDR was just as effective virtually as in person.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, oh, okay. Because you want to make sure that you're doing as good of a
Right.
job as you can.
Yeah.
And honestly, gosh, a lot of people just, I mean, they'll have their baby there in the session. And if we're
Mm-hmm.
doing slow taps, when something is really good, it could be really wonderful to have their baby right there sleeping and just do a few slow taps right there on the
Mm-hmm.
baby until that positive just grows, and then
Mm-hmm.
pause and take a breath. Um, yeah, it's really convenient. Meeting people in their cars,
Mm-hmm.
um, in their beds. It's like
Yeah.
we're everywhere. Yeah.
Right. When you have a new baby, there's, yeah, a lot of time spent there.
Mhm.
So that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
And I know you've talked a lot about EMDR in our other sessions. I didn't know if you wanted to spend a couple minutes explaining what that is in for this episode.
Yes. When it comes to EMDR, we're looking to help to heal trauma that is stuck in the nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
And so one thing that we're doing is we're using bilateral stimulation. So it may be like fast eye movements back and forth, fast taps back and forth, taps fast on your lap. You can also do audio where it's like a sound bilaterally back and forth, or a light bar, or on the computer, like a dot that can move back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
And using this bilateral stimulation, essentially what it's doing is we're creating this communication back between the amygdala and the hippocampus, back and forth,
Mm-hmm.
and also the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex.
Mm,
So we're having one foot in the present, that we are right here in the session, and then one foot in whatever the target is, the traumatic incident or memory,
Mm-hmm.
and being able to help these three areas of the brain communicate to each other during interacting with this traumatic memory.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of times when things happen that are traumatic, okay, you may disconnect from your body.
Right.
You may also, gosh, just our prefrontal cortex is not on board.
Yeah.
That rational brain is
Mm-hmm.
not on board. It is just driven by the limbic system.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're essentially reestablishing this line of communication between this emotions in your alarm system, the amygdala, the hippocampus with like the learning and the memory,
Mm-hmm.
and then also this prefrontal cortex with this rational part of our brain. So essentially, it's like thinking about like inviting all three of those pieces back into the incident, the
Mm-hmm.
traumatic incident, in order to, if you could have had someone there saying, giving you the information, like your prefrontal cortex,
Right.
saying, this is going to be okay. This
Mm-hmm.
is what we know to be true right now. Offering, really some stabilizing impact. Then you can look back after the reprocessing and look back at the traumatic incident and not feel all of those body sensations, not feel that incredible, overwhelming emotions with
Mm-hmm.
it, or images, or distressing thoughts. You can look at it and say, that was really hard. I don't want
Mm-hmm.
to do that again, go
Mm-hmm.
through that again, but you're adding more information to the traumatic memory so that it's more of a full picture as opposed to this wound that is kind of
Mm-hmm.
open and oozing. It's like we went in, we cleaned the wound, we stitched it up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and in one of our previous episodes on birth trauma, you also described it as like kind of like a series of like strings, or we kind of that visual came up, and
Mm-hmm.
there are like some tangles in some of the
Mm-hmm.
strings. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like going back and revisiting it in like a slower way as well, because trauma happens really quickly and is overwhelming. But like to be able to go back and tie the knots and like have everything like kind of make sense in a different way, and not just logically, but like you said, in your nervous system, it's like all these parts were able to like sit together, take apart the knot, see what was there. Oh, that's right, this happened. And almost like comb those knots out so it's like, makes sense. And it just sounds so beautiful. And I love hearing the neuroscience behind EMDR. That was just so described so well. So thank you for that.
It's so interesting because in between, whatever bilateral set you're doing, then pause, take a breath. What are you noticing now? And
Mm-hmm.
some of the things that people will say, it's, it's just always gives me like goosebumps, but oh my gosh, I forgot about this. I
Mm-hmm.
forgot that, this nurse said that when the birth trauma was happening, and that really, really helped me. Or even just an image that comes to mind that maybe didn't actually happen, but can be very nurturing. Like, wow, I just imagined like if my grandma would have been in the room holding my hand.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like your brain and does not realize that that didn't happen. But the
Mm-hmm.
fact that you're bringing it up, you can get the healing from that. So then you just say, okay, go with that. And so it's this unraveling, and it's in this feeling and just noticing that the healing really takes place. It's, and it's just amazing because your brain knows exactly where it needs to go. Just like that surgeon who knows exactly the steps of cleaning the wound and stitching it and bandaging it. Our bodies, our brains know what we need. where we need to go.
Yeah, and I think, Shelley, I'm just imagining how wonderful it is for people to like have you there with them, because I think that's a really important component when you are diving back into this work, is to have somebody there for guidance and support.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the reasons people go to therapy, because they have this person who is there with them and who is attuned to them and is like witnessing, because it can feel so alone, like you're so alone, so lonely when you experience a trauma. But to be able to be with somebody who is co-regulating with you and holding space for you and as a witness to what you experienced and the growth
Mm-hmm.
that is coming from doing the work.
Absolutely. I mean, that's really the piece, I think, is to be able to co-regulate and to be able to
Mm-hmm.
know, okay, this person, this, okay, the therapist is going to be able to stay regulated in this. Not that some of our stuff doesn't come up,
Mm-hmm.
but we're trained in how to kind of compartmentalize that and set that aside. But
Mm-hmm.
also too, you can use that in a way that really is helpful in you trying to be in tuned with
Right.
the client.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's so beautiful. And I think that
Mhm.
we're very lucky that you're doing this work, Shelley. And before we wrap up the third and final birth trauma episode, I wanted to see if there is anything else that you wanted to leave the listeners with.
Gosh, I think I have left every time with this, but this piece of you can heal and that there is hope, and being intentional about it. And I think for moms, especially, being able to say, I'm worth that. I need that. And actually, when I heal myself, I heal my child, I heal
Mm-hmm.
the next generation,
Mm-hmm.
that it's really, really powerful. Um, and that you can heal. Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree wholeheartedly. Absolutely. We can heal. And that's so beautiful. Thank you, Shelley. I've loved doing these birth trauma podcasts with you, and I'm going to be sad next week when we don't have one to do.
I know. I know. It has been really, really, really fun and exciting, and definitely it's getting the word out, I think, is important.
Yes,
Hmm.
absolutely. Spreading awareness. And like we talked about today, there are so many ways that people can heal, even if right now you are in some dark days. My hope is that this helps you see that there is a light and there are people that will climb down that ladder into
Yeah.
that dark space and be with you. Um, so yeah, I agree. Spreading awareness of both birth
Hmm.
trauma, but also that healing is possible. And
Hmm.
then before we hang up, I want to say that Shelley and I are partnering together to run a birth trauma support group. Shelley, as a therapist, has her background. I am a trauma informed yoga teacher and a peer specialist and a doula. And so we're both bringing in some interesting perspectives and inviting women who've experienced birth trauma to a group where they can find compassion and support and um, be with other people and see that they're not alone in the
Hmm.
experience.
Yeah.
So I will put links for all of that and some of the other things, Shelley, that you talked about in this podcast in the show notes. So for everybody listening, I will have links to everything that Shelley talked about, as well as our support group in the show notes. And thank you so much for being here and listening.
Yeah. Thanks.